Hi, it's Mark, back with another Photoshop tutorial, and today we're going to be looking at Blend If. Blend If is a very useful blending function, and it's a bit like using luminosity masks, but a quick way of using luminosity masks. And we're going to be using it today to look at applying textures, applying some saturation, some sharpening, and a number of other things. Oh yes, and some blending of layers. And yes, wrong side. I've been in the wars, so I deserve to have an ouch sticker. First aid. All right, roll the credits and we'll get cracking on the other side. Okay, so I think the best thing to do is to just dive straight into Blend If, because it's easier to demonstrate than it is to explain. But we'll go slow on this first one. Here's a picture. I'm going to add a layer on top of this, so click my plus for a create new layer, and I want to fill it with a gradient of black through to white. So I want to G for my gradient tool, and then in my gradient tool, which is over here, it may not have come up as gradient because there's more than one tool in that group. G could have also been bucket tool, just so happens it was on gradient. If yours isn't, right click and select it. And if you notice up here, the colours there are red to white, because currently my foreground and background colour is red and white, and the gradient that happened to be there was amongst basics, which is foreground to background, foreground to nothing, and then black to white. Okay, but I tend to leave it on that one, so we'll stick with that one for the moment, because just wanted to add that if you press D, it changes your default colours back to black and white, and X toggles between them. Right, so I've got that, I'm on this layer. Oh, and my gradient is a linear gradient, not a circular one. Circular one would look like that, but I want, in this case, just a linear one. So I'm going from left to right, and I've got my foreground to background gradient there. Okay, so Blend If, which is a bit like luminosity masks on steroids. It's a quick way to implement luminosity type blending options between your layers. So let's double click on my layer here to the side, and it brings up our layer styles option. And in the layer styles option, lots of things to look at, but we are just interested in this box down here, which is the Blend If. Blend If will work across colours, and we may come to that in due course, but for now it's on grey, and this is about luminosity. It concerns two layers. This layer being the layer you are on, and underlying layers, it should be, I think. It's whatever is visible either in a single layer, as is the case here, or multiple layers that you may have little bits on but all together make a picture. So it's anything visible underneath that layer. So let's have a look at this layer first. These sliders, if I move the one from, this is the entire luminosity spectrum from black to white. So if I move this over, what's it doing? Well, what it's doing is it's taking away from this layer anything really outside the bounds of these goalposts. So I move it in from there, you can see. Okay, so I've said we're going to take away or blend away darker elements and lighter elements. Very harsh borders. If you do Option on a Mac or Alt on a PC and click on that, they split. And if you do that, you can now see how, we'll do the same on this one, how that now starts to feather. So you can actually, when you're considering blending, you can start to get a feathering effect in there rather than the harsh edge we had. So this top slider is taking away, or blending out, if you like, elements outside of these goalposts. What about the bottom slider for everything underneath? Let's try that, shall we? What this is doing now is saying, I want to allow to come through anything outside of these goalposts. So here I'm allowing the darkest parts of my picture, remember this is based on luminosity, to come through. If I move it from the other side, I'm saying I'm allowing the lightest parts of my picture to come through in terms of luminosity. Again, we can option click or alt click on a PC, and we can feather that effect there. Now that's all well and good, but what does it mean? Oh, it might not be all well and good, I don't know, but let's say it is. It's all well and good, but what does it really mean in the real world? Well, in the real world, it allows us to do some cool blending effects. So we're going to be looking at merging two layers together without having to use a selection and cut out. We're going to be looking at controlling layer blending by looking at sharpening, color grading, saturation, and textures, all by using BlendIf to achieve what we want. And we're also going to look at noise reduction, and finally we'll be looking at creating some layer masks. So these then become luminosity type masks. So get rid of that, I don't need it, and let's jump over to a more real world example. This is a picture of my local garage round the corner wall, which is a lot of lime coming through, and I want to put on it some writing, as if I've actually painted that writing on. So let's just T for text tool, jump in here, Mark was here. All right. You know what? When I'm working with text, I very rarely set all the sizes up and this, that, and the other. I usually just do T for text, bang in what I want to, and I come in and actually start to adjust things. But you know, that's just the way I personally choose to do it. So there you go. You've got Mark was here on this brick wall, and we want to make it look like it was painted on. So firstly, I suppose we should really pick a little bit better font to do that. Let's just go with the handwriting type font. If we use BlendIf, and this time move the slider from beneath, from left to right, what we're saying is I want to allow things to come through from the underlying layer that are outside the bounds. So I'm actually preserving the darks here. This side, I'll be preserving the lights. All right, so by getting a happy balance in here, in fact, we probably just need this one slider, split it and soften it, we start to get the effect that that was actually painted on. If I just click OK on that, grab my move tool, which is this cross at the top, alternatively V for move tool, and go here. If I move this text, you see it is adaptive to what it looks like underneath. So if you look down here at the word here, where there's darker patches, and then I move it across, you see how the BlendIf preserves. And similarly, if I come up here where the K is, I'll mark onto that bit there. So that is one of the advantages where you can see how BlendIf is working. And it was all just by moving these here. If the colour had been a darker colour, a similar sort of thing, BlendIf, and this time we want to start preserve the lights. So the lighter side, so to the right now of where my cursor is going to be preserved and allowed to show through from the bottom picture. So there you go, we've got an effect where the whites are starting to come through, and if we just choose a different more blocky font there. So you can start to see how BlendIf allows us to do things. But it's not just on that, there's lots of other ways we can actually use it, and that's what we're going to explore through the next parts of this video. So let's jump back to our scene. And here, just to demonstrate a one where we can quickly blend two things together, I'm going to introduce an airplane. Okay, I'm choosing my things deliberately. I'm choosing something which is predominantly darker than the clouds, and I'm going to show how BlendIf just pops it on there straight away without any hassle. So let's go fetch a picture of a plane, shall we? One moment. Jump to Lightroom. Let's go to the air show. Find a plane without a trail. Go on, we'll use this one. Edit Photoshop. Edit original. Jump back over. Grab a hold of that. Drag it up to here. Oh, drag it up to that one. Bring it down and let go. Go back to here and shut it down because I like to tidy up. And I've got a plane. Do you know what? Control T. I want to go in left to right just because I do. I want to slightly up. I'm going to stick it somewhere like there. There you go. Perfectly blended plane that you can't really tell has been composited onto this landscape. Not. So let's just double click on our blend if, bring the layer style box out the way so we can see what's going on. And all we have to do here is this top layer. So I chose my picture deliberately just for this because it's horses for courses, but this can really give you a running start. Here, quite clearly, the blue sky around this fighter is lighter. So if we say, using the top layer, that we want to take away from the top layer things outside these goalposts, and I move those goalposts across, you slowly see what happens. Now you can still see some fuzz under there. I'm going to split the cursor though, Alt or Option on a Mac, just to feather it a bit more. Click OK, and I will zoom in. Now then, notwithstanding anything else you might want to do, and notwithstanding the fact that changing that to face either way is wrong idea because the 79 on his tailgate is different. Control T, clip horizontal. There you go, that's better. How easy was that? How long would it have taken to actually get a selection, to refine the edges of the selection? I argue that this can be done in seconds. Now I know I've practiced this, but let's just see, shall we? So assume I've got my other picture ready, which I do. So start the clock, go into Lightroom, edit in, Photoshop, edit original, bring it up and drop it onto our picture, roughly position it, Control T, Delete T, there you are, enter, double click, layer styles box, bring that down, add a little bit of feather in it, job done. Select the move tool and where do you want your plane to be? Okay, do you want another plane? Control T, Control J, which inherits the layer styles, which is important. Now Control T, make the second plane a bit smaller and stick it in the background there. Control minus to get a bigger picture of it all framed up nicely. And there you have it. How long did that take? How difficult was that? How many masks were involved? Not a single mask. Yet we did it. But yes, the odds were in our favour because of the style of picture. But when you're putting things in the sky and it's a darker object, it is so easy. When you're putting anything that has got a naturally light background that you want to blend over something, blend if it's a no-brainer not using blend if. So let's have a look at something else now. But first let's tidy up. So I don't need that layer anymore. I should get rid of that. I might come back to this one. Let's have a look. Don't want that one, and I don't want that one. Not going to save that. So let's go grab another picture from Lightroom. Go on, I use this a few times, so at least it shows a bit of consistency on the different types of effects we can get on different pictures. So let's edit that one in Adobe Photoshop. Edit original, and we're not going to save it anyway. Okay, so let's assume on this particular picture, we want to put a bit more of a colour grading on. So what should we look to do? I think I want to put a bit of warmth into the skyline a little bit. So let's see how we can do that and possibly have that reflected into the highlights which are in the tine there. Now clearly we're talking about luminance values here. The areas I want to adjust here are predominantly the lighter areas. So this is where our friend once again is blend-if. So let's have a think about putting a color grade on this. Now, as with everything in Photoshop, we can do things lots of different ways. So let me show you two ways to apply a bit of a color grading here, but the actual techniques and topics are about blend-if. So the first one is I'm just going to put a solid color adjustment layer. Oh, by the way, this layer is my signature, bottom left. So really, you know what I should do. There we go. So let's just put a solid color adjustment layer on top, and let's pick something a bit warmer. Doesn't that look lovely? And let's change the blend mode to color. Let's lower the opacity a little bit. Right, now I just want this really to be onto the highlights. Okay, so what I want to do here, there's a couple of ways of attacking this. From what we've learned so far, we can say using this layer to take away, sorry, to preserve everything between the goalposts. So we move these goalposts in, and everything else will on the outside of these will actually still show through in terms of a luminance value. So by that logic, if I were to split this and slide it along, I get the point where I'm covering virtually all of the dark values. The reason why I split it, by the way, was because if it was left a hole, it would continue along, and then there'd be a rapid point where that luminosity just tipped over, because remember this layer here, that is a set luminosity, so there will be a set point where it disappears and not. Okay, so I decided to split that using my option and click, or alt and click on a PC, and where that split point is, I then decided to feather it. Okay, so I've just put a little bit in there in the highlights. So let's click there, switch that off and on. So that's one way of attacking this. So the other way is to use the underlying layers. So here what I want to do is it preserves everything between the goalposts. So I don't want to bring the lights down very far. I don't know. Let's have a quick look. What I want to do definitely though is to bring the black point up, start preserving that. Let's split it and take it up higher. I know this looks a bit funny at the moment, bear with. And the reason why I'm doing this on the bottom layer is because I want to show you something slightly different. I'm going to now take it out some of the light, so preserving some of that high luminosity, and I'm going to split this and I'm going to take this over. And this is what I want to demonstrate as well, just a little feature. You can overlap these bounds once you split them. Okay, so now if we have a look at that, it's a different effect again. We've allowed some of the high bits to come through. It's a bit too strong for my liking, so I'd bring the opacity down a little bit more, and then we can go before and after. And because this is luminosity and not a mask of the sky or a gradient coming down from top to bottom, because we use a colour fill, you can see that those colours are also picked up in the more luminant parts of the tine as well. So that is one way. The other way of doing this, of course, is to add a gradient map. So click on my background layer, come down to here and add a gradient map, come past it, there it is. Now what's happened there? Well, the gradient map it has applied is a foreground to background colour, which happened to be over here. As you can see, I had white and black. So let's just undo that just to demonstrate that that's in fact the case. I will now press X to toggle my foreground and background colour, and I'll come back and apply a gradient map just so you can visually see that was in fact the case. There, so to apply the gradient map. So what is a gradient map? Well, let's have a look, shall we? Let's click on there and we'll have our gradient editor. Now these are the darks, these are the lights, and we're familiar scale, the same used in our luminosity masks and our blends if and everything across the spectrum. So what we are saying here is blacks are going to be applied at this end. So what if I just change those to something a bit more gaudy, like a darker purple? And what about this end? I change to something a bit brighter. I don't know, something like that. And I move the midpoint over a little bit. There you go. So now what I've done is I've applied that gradient. Instead of being from black to white or white to black, I've actually chosen a colour which I want in the shadows and one which I want in the lights. Now typically what I would then do is change my colour, my blend mode to colour. I'll probably lower the opacity by eye anyway, and then bring out the layer styles. And with this we do exactly the same thing again. I'm just going to use the underlying layer. I'm going to split it right from the off, and I'm going to slide this over to preserve the darks and really feather them up. And then similarly with the lights. Now colour grading is to taste, and less is more. Let's click OK on there, and then off and on. Whether you like the colour grading I've just done is irrelevant. What is relevant though is the method, using the tool, and in doing the two ways. Basically we've learned how to use BlendIf on this, but I've also shown you two ways to start to look to apply a colour gradient. One is using a gradient map, and the other was the solid colour adjustment layer. There are others, and I have got other videos on colour grading, and I'll put a link above right now. So please go and check that out, but not until you've finished watching this one. Let's have a look at another one, shall we? So we'll jump back over into Lightroom. Oh, let's use this one. And we'll do something with saturation. So let's edit that one in Adobe Photoshop. Okay. I was quite pleased with this picture. In fact, I entered it into a competition and it came second, but that is by the by. What I'm going to do here is I want to just pick some of the blues, saturate some of the blues in the sky, I think, but I don't really want to saturate the rest. And there's lots of ways you can do that in Photoshop, but we're playing with BlendIf, so let's have a quick look at BlendIf again. So firstly, let's get a saturation layer on, hue saturation, and let's just bump up the saturation globally. I don't know, till I'm happy with what the sky's looking like. I'm ignoring all of this, okay? I'm looking at kind of the sea and the sky, and I think about there, about 48. And let's call up our BlendIf, or rather our layer styles dialog box, and BlendIf, and let's pop this down onto a channel. Now let's pick blues. And what we're going to do here is take away from the underlying layer, move these goalposts so that the saturation doesn't affect what is on the layers below outside the bounds of these poles. You get the idea. We've done it a few times already, so let's bring this across. Let's split that. Just to my taste, yours might be different. I think about there looks okay. Now let's just do it before and after. So there it was originally, and there it was with the hue saturation bumped up, but we've confined it to the blues. So we've lifted colour in here and here because there are blue tints in there. No doubt some other places on the picture as well. There is obviously some blues in the decking here, but that is another way. You've got three colour channels, and you've got the grey, all of which are working on the luminance values between the two. So it's a case of what effect you're trying to achieve. And with that in mind, I think the next thing we should look at, very similar technique, in fact almost exactly the same technique, look at sharpening. So for that, let's choose another picture. Let's close this one down, don't save. I think we're finished with that one as well, so let's close that one down. Don't save, and let's jump over into Lightroom again and pick another picture. What about this one? Edit and Photoshop. It isn't always photographs this works on. This is one of my digital art pieces. That is St Mary's Lighthouse, and I want to add a bit of sharpening, and I'm going to use BlendIF to control the sharpening. So we're going to learn one way of doing sharpening. Again, in Photoshop there are many ways of doing sharpening. We're going to learn one way of doing sharpening, and then we're going to show how BlendIF can be used to control it. So let's make a copy of this layer. This is a well-known sharpening technique if you do a search for how to sharpen in Photoshop. It's almost a tongue twister. The idea is you apply a filter to this layer, which is a high pass filter. Now, the pixel radius, if I bring it up, you'll start to see the outlines. You need to adjust this so it's barely seen. And I'm leaving that about 1.3, 1.5 so that you can see it. It's clear for me down at about 1. I can make it out, but probably not on YouTube by the time I've got the video. So I'm bumping it up to about 1.6, and hopefully you can see the outlines of the house and the straight edge of the lighthouse here. So I'm just going to apply that. Now, in order to sharpen, we change the blend mode to linear light. And if I switch this on and off, you can clearly see how it's sharpened, particularly if we zoom in a little bit. If you look around the outside of the lighthouse, the railings here, the side of the building, and so on. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to copy that layer so that it's exactly the same. So we've got a reference. Okay, this is our default sharpening. Helps if I could spell, especially when you're all watching. And let's switch that off, and let's go in here now. Double click, usual drill, and what I want to do is I want to take away the sharpening. I want to preserve the darks and preserve the lights. So really I'm going to use the underlying layer, which is this one, and I want to say, look, I don't want you to apply to the darks, and I don't want you to apply to the lights, and I'm going to feather those as well because we don't like abrupt transitions. And if I click OK on that, now if I click on and off, you'll see that the sharpening is mostly on the midtones. It's not strong around the outside edges. There is a bit on the outside edges, so let me just go in, take a little bit more away on that. Also demonstrating this is non-destructive. You can keep going in and doing this. So let's have a look. That looks a little bit better. Now, if by comparison I switch back to that one, you won't really see this one underneath. On and off, it is far more sharp. Let's try and zoom out and see. That's sharpened across the whole piece, whereas this one is just on the midtones. If I toggle this one off and on top, you should see the extra sharpening come in. Yes, you can see that around particularly around the colours and some of the saturation being picked up because of sharpening around the chimneys and so on. And that's not what I was after. So this is a maintained a slight blur on that, a more watercolour effect, which is what this digital art piece is all about. So there you go. That is one way to sharpen, and it's one way you can use BlendIF to control sharpening. All right, let's look at noise reduction. Let's close that down and jump back over to Lightroom. Pick another one of my pictures. We'll use this one because invariably you get noise in skies. So let's edit that one in Adobe Photoshop. Let's get rid of that layer. That was just an adjustment layer I had on to add an oil effect, which possibly could be the subject of another video. Let's zoom right in and let's get a chunk of that sky in here. You can see some noise and some grain in there. Not a great deal, granted, but there are some there. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to take a copy of the layer, and then I'm going to apply a filter. I'm not going to bother with smart objects just at the moment for this one. It's not important for this. And the filter I'm going to add is noise and reduce noise. Now I've purposely well, it's already set. Purposely set the strength high. I'm not interested in preserving details. I want to maximum reduce color noise, and I do not want to sharpen the details. And then if I click OK, and we look here around the sky and the sides of the lighthouse, when I switch that off and on, you can clearly see what it's done. So let's get back to normal size, possibly a little bit higher, and zoom in a little bit. There you go. Now, on and off. Now you can see that softens all the sky, and that's quite nice, I think. But if you look at the rendering of the bricks, I don't want to take all the noise and grain and a little bit out of there that such a heavy filter's done. So what I'm going to do is use my blend if, although why I decided to switch the layer off before I did that, I've got no idea. Let's switch it back on. I bring lack of coffee, must have one after this. Okay, quite simply we are going to be preserving the darks and a little bit out the lights, because there wasn't so much in there for the dome on here. So let's, from the underlying layer, preserve the dark bits by bringing this over and then split it. So I'm predominantly looking here at the grain on here, the brickwork, the definition we were starting to lose on there, and on here just looking at the cap of the lighthouse, and I'm not worried that it's also going to let a little bit of noise in there. That's starting to be blown out anyway. It's not really going to make a difference. So now if we switch on and off, the brickwork is not as much impacted. I'll leave it on for a bit longer time so you can see, if you look at the definition around the sky and some of the noise that's in there, it softens it out. I hope you can make that out on YouTube video. I promise you that it can be seen on my monitor. So that's sharpening. So the final thing I would like to try and do is to show you a way of using this to produce a mask, which you can then apply for any other effects. So let's get cracking with that. Let's choose another picture to do that with. So once more, let's jump over into Lightroom. So something with a lot of lines in it. Oh, we'll use this one because it looks like it could be a complex selection. So let's edit in Adobe Photoshop. Get rid of that layer because I'm not interested in that one. Okay, this one's a little bit more finicky than the others, and it's not the best of pictures to have chosen. I will learn to speak English on my next video, but bear with me. Let's have a go. So let's take a copy of it first. We always like to take copies so we don't we always have a get out of jail card. Now in here, I'm going to switch this off. In here, I would use blend if. Now what's it blending if against? It's blending if against nothing because there's nothing under it. So what would happen if I take all the highlights down? Because I'm interested in trying to do a sky replacement or something like that. So I'm going to take that down. You see how it takes it all out. I'm going to feather it a little bit as well. So now effectively I've removed the sky. The reason why I knew it would not be a good one is because I've also taken out some of the tine and I've taken out the roof of the stage, but they're all easily fixable. What this is here to demonstrate more is how finicky the selection would be around here. And yes, Photoshop is very good. It's got some great tools now, but sometimes this might be an appropriate technique to use. So let's go and have a look at this. So if I click OK, and then I create a new layer beneath it, a new empty layer, and merge these two together by highlighting them and go merge layers. Alright, what's that giving me? It's giving me this layer without the more luminant values. Let's bring our background back, and again let's take a copy because we want to get out a jail card. And let's say we want to do a sky replacement here. With this layer highlighted, if I command and click or control click, I get a selection of everything in that layer. So what it hasn't included was everything where there wasn't. Remember, we merged it after doing this, the blend if with a blank layer. So if I now go here and click mask, I inherit that mask, and lo and behold, I've masked everything out. Okay, Mark, you said it wasn't the most ideal, so how to fix it? Well, it's a mask. B for brush tool, D for default colours. Come over here, X to change it to black. Let's get a little hard brush. And let's fix the fact that we didn't want it to, Control Z, X. We want white. And let's paint all that back. And where we're on, just roughly bring back the sage. You can spend more time on that. But there you go. In a relatively small space of time, albeit with a few steps, we've managed to use luminosity, create a luminosity mask based on BlendIf. I hope that made sense. I hope the whole video has made sense. Please leave any comments you like below. If you like this channel, please click on subscribe and give it a thumbs up if you like it. And no doubt we'll get around to posting more videos in the near future. Until then, bye-bye.